Okay, so it's so good to be in conversation with you, Dr. Simmons, President Simmons, who I
Ruth.
first, excuse me?
Ruth.
Ruth, who I first heard about when you became president of Smith. And I was somewhere in my own educational career, and that was a huge, huge highlight for all of us. One thing I'll give a shout out to, I know Dr. Simmons, I know he said Ruth, Dr. Simmons' new book, Up Home, One Girl's Journey. This was reviewed in the New York Times alongside of Drew Gilpin-Faust's book. And I got it then and didn't know I would be in conversation with you when I got it then. And I think it's an extraordinary book. It's a terrific memoir. It looks at your time growing up in Grapeland, Texas, Grapeland, Latexo, and then the Fifth Ward of Houston, starting in 1952. The daughter of really hardworking folks who were sharecroppers, the youngest of 12. And it's really a remarkable journey. The way in which I read this book was really, it taught me so much about just leadership. It taught me a lot about discipline. It reminded me of my own mother's story. My mother passed away last year, but was a Haitian immigrant who came to the United States and was very, very steadfast about what education meant for me and my older brother in New York City. So I'm going to start with a question about your childhood and really your inspiration. But I would really just tell our participants here, this is a really terrific book and I know some people have it already, but something to get and something to teach, because I think it teaches a lot about resilience, it teaches a lot about discipline and fortitude, but also about having a great attitude, because you stay, I'm an inveterate optimist, and you stay very much optimistic, even though there were all these challenges that you talk about along the way. So the first question is, what inspired you to write this now?
Thank you, and thank you for agreeing to do this. I do have to say, however, that being here and being honored in this way means more to me than you could possibly imagine. I grew up in Fifth Ward, walking past Barbara Jordan's house. And not only is she an iconic figure for people from Fifth Ward, but she set the mold for so many of how to live courageously in a fight for justice. So while I've been honored many places, I don't think anything matches this for me. So,
well, it's a really fitting honor, because you so honor and reflect Barbara Jordan's heroic legacy.
thank you. So as to what made me write the book, I came along in higher education at a time when there were not many women in leadership positions, nor many, throw it here. You know, my family are often embarrassed by me because at pivotal moments I cry. And my sister always says, "You're always crying and you never have a Kleenex." So her daughter has now sent me a Kleenex, thank you. So there weren't many like me around. And the thing about it when you come along early is that people, perhaps falsely, attach significance to the fact that you are the first. And it concerned me greatly over the many years of my career that students looked upon me as a figure that was larger than life. And I was troubled by that. When I was president of Smith, I was driving along one day, and there was a student who had a broken leg, and she was struggling up the hill on crutches. And of course, I stopped my car and said, "Get in, I'll take you wherever you want to go." And to my horror, she said, "Oh no, President Simmons, if you can do what you've done with all of the obstacles you've had, I can surely get up this hill on crutches." I thought that was absurd, okay? She should have just gotten in the car, right? And over time, the same thing happened to me at Brown, where, where they, called me all kinds of good names. And then at Prairie View, where they called me Ruth the Truth. And I'm just thinking, I don't want my students to see me that way. I want them to see my life as an example of someone who simply took advantage of everything that came along and worked the hardest they could to achieve something of significance. So I started writing the book thinking, I'm going to tell them the real story of my life so that they will see that it's not all that, okay? It's just a one person doing simply everything possible to embrace the possible, okay? And so I started writing it for that. So I say it's a book that I wrote for my students to give them an example of what they can do if they're only open-minded, if they're only working hard at what they're trying to do, if they only believe in a future that's better than today.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's extraordinary. I want us to talk about that educational journey and how it impacted your intellectual trajectory. You, throughout Up Home, there are many distinct scenes where you remember entering a classroom for the first time. You have different mentors and teachers, You go from, and we can set the scene because you go from Grapeland to Latexo to Fifth Ward, Houston, and your family in those years were a little bit itinerant, having to move. And you even talk about some moves in the Fifth Ward of Houston where the final home, there were real challenges there. Yet throughout, you also look upon how education, both in your elementary school, but your junior high, and in Phyllis Wheatley, was really, really key for you. And you had these teachers who were huge, both role models and mentors. One thing I found so interesting was how interested you were in theater and acting, and how that really brought something out in you as well. So how did that educational journey, and really during that time, because you go back and forth a little bit at times, you talk about being president of Smith and the exchange year you did at Wellesley when you were at Dillard. How did that time just really impact you? Because you talk about really moving challenges.
I hope you don't think I'm going to remember all of that. Okay, so stop at a question as that I can remember.
How did that? I'm your student, so I'll take the direction. How did your education and those challenges?
So first of all, just so that people get the context, I'm the last of 12 children in a family that is working as sharecroppers.
Yes.
Okay. And so sharecrop, those of you who are familiar with the history, know that sharecropping was a meager existence at best, but it was also a meager existence in the context of pre-civil rights and Jim Crow. And so you mattered not at all, except to feed the economy. Because in that period, of course, the fabrics that were being facilitated by cotton in this country was really being used in Europe. And so it was very profitable, and therefore you needed workers. Well, everybody had to work. So it wasn't just that the parents went to the fields. The children were in the fields too. So my older siblings were doing hard labor at a very young age. And of course, if they had to do hard labor, they couldn't possibly go to school because the labor was more important, it was more profitable. But being the last, I was too young to really absorb the worst part of that system. And so we moved away from Grapeland when I was seven years old. But before we did, I went into my first classroom. And there is in this classroom a transformation for me from the very outset. And so I'm coming from essentially a hovel with very meager means, no ability to have decent clothes or shoes. And I walk into a classroom, and this woman, Miss Ida Mae Henderson, treated me like I mattered. Unforgettable. So I come in, and she calls me these affectionate names, as she did to all the students, and she showed me to a desk that was my desk, with my books and my utensils. So suddenly I'm there. I've come from seeing people toiling in the hot fields, and then I'm in this place where suddenly mind work is valued, and I'm being praised for it. I'm not being praised because I hoed well, okay? I'm being praised because my mind has generated something that seems to matter, that my teacher is impressed with. So from that time on, I came to think of school as a place where I could be something valuable, and where I could certainly learn. And that started it all for me. And from that moment on, I encountered a series of educators, teachers, who, honestly, I can't even fathom today how they came to be the people they were. Because for caring, for interest in young people, they had no equals, okay? Now keep in mind, all of these schools are segregated. They are short of resources, and all the children in the school are deemed worthless and not eligible for higher level intellectual work. So that's the environment. So in this environment where you're supposed to be suppressed as to your ability, these teachers are holding out the view that you can be smart, you can be creative, you can do things because, and this is the hitch, because the future could be different from what it is today. And there's no way in the world, with my parents and my family enduring what they're doing, there's no way that I could anticipate a world in which I could become, I have to laugh when I say it, it's so ridiculous. I could become the first black president of an Ivy League university. I mean, come on. I couldn't envision that as a child, but here's what they did for us. They envisioned it for us. They hoped for us, right? And so that's what teachers do. That's what they do for children. They give them the tools to learn. They give them the ability to see things beyond the immediate limitations that they have. They teach them to aspire to something. That's what education was for me from the time I stepped into the first grade classroom all the way through. I knew that mind work was something I was going to be committed to one way or another. But even though I was doing that, keep in mind, even up to my time in high school, I thought I was going to be a maid. That's where I thought I was going to, where life was going to take me. And so the idea that there was, although I was working hard and learning, I didn't think that was going to lead anywhere. I thought I was doing it for myself, okay, to make myself feel better. Because walking into that classroom with shreds on and with nappy hair, somebody looked at me and said I mattered, right? And so I just liked the feeling of being worthy. And I liked the feeling that I could demonstrate something that said to people, in spite of what I was wearing, I still could be somebody. I could even be equal to other people. And so poverty is a crushing experience, as some of you may know. And the idea, when you're impoverished, that you're not going to be imprisoned forever in that cell is something that you have to grow out of, right? Eventually, hopefully you grow out of that. But education is everything. It's everything to empowering people to take charge of their fate, to work hard, to be learned, to do things that they dared not think they could do. And that's why, to me, the single most important thing we can do in this country is to reach every child in the country and to make it possible for them to learn.
All right, and so let's talk about Houston and the Fifth Ward. And you really spend quite a bit of the memoir talking about Houston and how that impacted you and your family. Also, your mom transitioned by the time you were in Houston between junior and senior years of high school. How did Houston and living in Houston impact you and this educational journey? Because you have so many different teachers you talk about, but there was a community center in Houston that you went to. And you kept growing as a person. You were reading more at times. You and your mom had a little bit of tension when you went to that different church, but you kept wanting to grow more and more. And I think Houston is a real key for you and really your entire family.
It is indeed, but keep in mind, though, I'm going from a small town in East Texas to a city, but I'm in a segregated part of the city, okay? So we're just a stone's throw from downtown Houston, but the line of demarcation is very sharp. We didn't go downtown, because what were we to do downtown? We couldn't go in department stores and try on clothes. We couldn't go to eat downtown. So it's very much a segregated world. But even within that segregated world, there was more diversity in our community. So for example, Fifth Ward was typically people lived below the poverty line, if I could say it that way, in Fifth Ward. But there were black professionals there. There were doctors and lawyers and teachers that we could become familiar with. And so you could see another aspect of life, although you couldn't live it. You could see other people doing things that were extraordinary. I tell the story of my teacher from E.O. Smith Middle School, junior high school, who was a very funny woman, and I hope that you like the portrait of her, but she was quite a character. So she was a woman who was married to the owner of a dry cleaning business. And she was quite the person. She cared a lot about her appearance. She cared about acquiring things that she didn't need. of which she did quite a lot. And so she asked me to come and do cleaning for her in her home. And her home was in Third Ward, and it was a middle-class Black community. And when I went there and I saw the way she lived, I thought, there are Black people who live like this, right? And so she had matching things in her house. She had brocaded kind of furnishings that matched from one room to the next. She had figurines everywhere, okay? Precious little stuff that she collected. She had a china cabinet with fine china in it and a dining room, okay? And she had a den that had leather couches in it. This is a world that was really, I didn't know what to make of it. But the truth is that being in a larger city gave me access to different economic strata within the Black community, because I'd never seen that before coming to Houston. And she was a great inspiration to me, although I didn't agree with her politics at all. But she was very kind to me, to be a teacher and to come up with the ruse, which was a ruse, that I could clean her house for her, okay? And of course, what happened when I went there to clean her house? She'd make lunch for me, and she'd take me shopping with her, which was an incredible exercise, because here's this loud Black woman going into these stores and buying everything in sight. And I noticed that the white salespeople were just transfixed by this spectacle of how this woman was doing all this. But of course, she was a teacher. She had a husband who owned a dry cleaning store, and they had no children. And so here she was, she had all this income that she could do things with. So teachers like her who took that extra interest made all the difference to me. When I got ready to go off to college, it was facilitated by a teacher, my drama teacher, okay? And when I got ready to pack to go to this foreign place, New Orleans, I didn't know what to do because I had no money to buy anything. But one of my teachers had me come over to her house, Miss Farnsworth, an English teacher. And she said she wanted me to do cleaning for her, another ruse. But what she really wanted, she asked me to go into her closet and to pick out clothes that I could pack to go off to college. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. So this is the kind of thing, this is kind of environment we were in, where we had teachers who would go that extra step. I had a very rakish boyfriend at the time, and I'm being kind when I say rakish. And they were apparently very worried about me because of his reputation. And it said that they took him aside and threatened him. And I was devastated because I lost my boyfriend, but they were comprehensive, okay? If you're dating somebody you don't need to be dating, we're gonna fix that, okay? If you don't have clothes to go to college, we have that covered, and so on. So it was remarkable. I have tried every day of my professional career to do half as much as they did for me. And I even today, I cannot imagine how generous they were. But that's what made the difference. Teachers. Yeah.
Okay, in terms of time, I have one final question, but I really want to squeeze in two. So I was fascinated by the last part of the book where I was fascinated by your college career. Your university career is spectacular. And this is as an undergraduate, so I'm not talking about Harvard and being president, although I want to have the last question on that. But you're so intellectually curious, I mean, I think, and courageous. I want you to talk about how, you're at Dillard, you're finding the classes not necessarily challenging enough. You seek out and you have mentors who help you. But then you're able to go to Wellesley for a year and you're picked to do that. But you also, you're taking Spanish and you go to Mexico and you're able to immerse yourself there. But you also are able to go to France and live with the family. I mean the courage. And you talk about the kindnesses you received, but you're also very courageous in terms of to be up for these things. And I think it's great that in that historical time period, because you're talking about the civil rights era, that you're able to get scholarships and resources to go to these places. So in terms of your undergraduate career, and one thing we can say is that you did rebel. You talk about the protest against chapel. There's a point where Dillard is saying, what's going to happen here? But once you get accepted to Harvard and all these different things, you graduate summa cum laude. So
I think that, first of all, I was awful when I was an undergraduate. And part of it was the death of my mother. I was really rebelling. And I didn't hesitate to tell every administrator what was wrong with the university. Okay, and the reason I went to Wellesley is because they concocted that as a way of getting rid of me. I was called to the president's house one Saturday thinking that they had finally decided they were going to kick me out, and instead he said that they had decided that I should go on the exchange program to Wellesley. But because I was making a lot of noise on campus, and protesting things, and ridiculous things, now I see. So for example, I was outraged that we were required to go to chapel. Outraged. Now, I'm the daughter of a Baptist minister. Okay, but I was outraged at the idea. And so I said, but what if there is a Muslim student or a Jewish student and this Protestant service, you'd make them go to a Protestant? How dare you? How dare you do that? But of course, there were no Muslims or Jews there. And so it was very, it was Pyrrhic in a way. But I had started to fight for things in abstraction, right? And think about how the world would look if it were a just place. And so whether there were students like that there at that moment or not didn't matter to me. I thought the policies ought to be sound and reflect openness to others. So that was pivotal to me, the opportunity that I had at Dillard to find that voice and certainly to find the voice of protest and to stand up to people who were more powerful and who could withhold things from me. Because in my senior year, ultimately, what Dillard said is I couldn't graduate because I had not fulfilled the chapel requirement. And this is why I always say to students, don't worry about any of that. Just do what you have to do. Because what I had done in my senior year is that I had applied for graduate school. I won a Danforth Fellowship, which would pay for all of my PhD studies. I won a Fulbright that would send me to France, and I gained admission to Harvard. And suddenly the university realized that although they had written home saying Ruth cannot graduate because she hasn't satisfied this requirement, they reversed it because they wouldn't be able to announce that if I didn't graduate.
That's great.
That's great. Do what you have to do. Do what you're supposed to do. Don't worry about the flack you're getting from it, right?
Yeah.
Because things work themselves out.
Things work out. All right. Any questions? Okay, so we have time for questions, right? Yes. Yes, okay. Shante, can we bring the or the microphone down here, right here. Yeah, right here. And then.
Can't we just shout?
Yes.
Okay, you can, yes. Yes.
Hello. Dr. Simmons, this is an amazing book, so I'm going to.
Thank you.
Since we're going to shout, I understand. So, as a proud graduate and professor at the Barbara Jordan Mickey Leland School of Public Affairs, I'm on loan here, but can you talk about the importance of HBCUs in 2024? One of my delightful colleagues here asked me, do they still need them? Can you touch on that and say why? And I have a former student here who's also here with me now. So.
Okay. Thank you so much. You know, for some reason, in spite of the tremendous success that we've had in this country with a very, very kind of diverse system of education, I think people still don't understand that there are many countries, most in fact, where education is uniform across institutions. The state provides the resources, and in exchange for that, okay, you compete in a national exam, and only those who are able to score appropriately get assigned to one of the universities. And that's the reality of the world, as we, almost no matter where you are, that's the reality. Instead, we grew up very differently here in higher education, and we have an extraordinarily varied set of institutions in the country. But each of them, in a way, serves a function. And to me, the blessing of this it really is that there's a place for everybody. But you can't say that elsewhere. You know, I got into a taxi in New York City, and the taxi driver was telling me how thrilled he was to be here in this country, because his wife had come here, and though she was older, she was able to go to college and to get a degree. Okay, so we've got community colleges, we've got state universities, we have private institutions, we have women's institutions, we have men's institutions. I'm on the board of one, Morehouse College. We have Jewish institution, and so on. We have Catholic institutions. And so, to me, these institutions arise from a need. And it's the need that's being satisfied. And as long as they're being satisfied, and we can produce individuals who contribute immensely to the country in the way that graduates of Morehouse have done, graduates of Spelman have done, graduates of Prairie View, but not TSU, have done. Sorry. I always have to do that whenever I say it. What harm are we doing? The one change that I think is beneficial, which I've talked to people about, is that it used to be that only blacks went to HBCUs because that's the only place they could go. But now, in HBCUs, you'll find Hispanic students, you'll find Asian students, you'll find white students, and so forth. And I think that trend, honestly, is there and will continue. So as long as you're not illegally blocking access, there is nothing wrong with HBCUs. In fact, there's everything that I can think of positive with it, because there are people drawn to them because it gives them room to be annoying like I was at Dillard, okay? it gives them room to, and so I looked at my students at Prairie View, and they'd come along and they'd, do outrageous things. And I could say, you are doing something outrageous. And I know that I could tell them that, and they would never get that if they were at Harvard, right? And so there was a young man who was waiting to meet with me in the outer office, and during open office hours at Prairie View, and I walked out to him and I said, hello, how are you? I extended my hand, and he extended his hand to me. But he was sitting there with a hat on, and he didn't get up when I walked up. And so I said, what is wrong with you? You are sitting there, I have walked up to you, I've extended my hand. Don't you know that you're supposed to get up and take your hat off and shake my hand? And I can do that with my students at Prairie View, okay? But try doing that, if you're someplace else. It doesn't work as well, right? So there's somebody back there.
Okay, right here and then back there. Yeah, because he's been waiting. And then Jeremy.
Ruth Simmons, you are a national treasure.
Oh,
So
thank you.
be here.
Thank you. Thank you.
I have a two-part question. Forgive me.
Let's just do
everyone.
one, just so we can get.
I'll be real quick.
Just-
As a Complet and French expert, what do you say to all these people who are pushing exclusively the STEM education track? And my other question is, seeing as how deeply moved you were by the space to create yourself as a child in the country, what do you say to parents who are faced by this constant media onslaught? That's my two-parter. Thank you. I'm brown alone.
Okay, all right. Well, what I say to people who try to shove all of us into, categories of achievement, I say go fly a kite, because the most important thing is to be in something that you value, something where you can thrive, something where you can make a contribution. I've seen too many students over time follow their parents' dictates. I don't know if any of you have done that. Follow their parents' dictates about what they should major in. And they have been very unhappy and very unsuccessful at what they are trying to do. And so it's important to remember that when it comes to your intellectual ability, we think of that as being somehow kind of devoid of emotion, but it's not. When you marry intellectual interest with your passion, something different is created, okay? And that's what we want to see. And proof of that is the fact that, again, if you're in China and you're told, no, you can only go to university if you're going to study this, right? What is China trying to do? China's trying to find a way to get the creativity into universities there in the way that we have it in the United States, because you have to match people with what their interests and their passion are. So I really think that I always said to my students when they came in, if your parents give you trouble about your major, send them to me, because I'll talk to them. So I've had pitch battles with parents over protecting a student's right to study something of interest to them. And it's also true that a lot of people don't remember the long length of a career. Can you imagine being in something that you have to do for as long as you have to do a career? It's horrible. So I was given a hard time early on because I was studying French. And I was told that I would never be able to do anything important in life, that I would not make a decent living, that I would not be able to advance in a profession, because of course nobody's interested in French, and nobody cares if you know French. And so that was the advice I was given. And of course, it was absolutely the wrong advice because I was doing something. I gave a lecture on this year I gave the Jefferson Lecture this year in Washington, and I talked about this, the fact that there are so many different things that motivate us as human beings. And there were things in French culture and in French literature that set me afire and that taught me how to do something that I wanted to do. And I gave the example of the Francophone writers, particularly Césaire. Do you know his work?
Yes, Aimé Césaire.
Yeah, have you read him in French?
Not in French, in English.
Well,
English
he is not to
translation.
be read in
Just
English.
the English translation.
Okay.
My mom could read him in French, but I couldn't. She read
Well, how does
French.
that help you?
Well, I mean, that's
The
the
fact
thing.
that your mom can do it doesn't
Yeah.
help you at all.
Well,
You
I
have
mean,
to do it.
Yeah, but
Yeah. Oh, okay.
No, I'm only saying she
Okay.
could because she
Oh,
knew 4 languages.
okay,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah. I mean, and now that she's passed, she couldn't help me.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But that's the thing, is that, and the second part of your question was, forgive me,
It was about the peace you found being in nature and the not being under this barrage of stimulation all the time.
I think that even years ago, when Brown students would come to me and ask me for advice, I would tell them, go onto the green and sit out on the grass and think. I'm very concerned about the slavish use of not only media, but of kind of artificial assistance that we have become so wedded to today, because it does shrink your capacity. I can tell when I'm talking to students, especially the ones that are like this all the time, and I can tell that I'm not talking to the same caliber of mind that I am talking to when I'm talking to somebody who's been sitting on the grass thinking, for example. And so I often say to students and to parents, make sure that you're incorporating in your child's day the opportunity to do things that will help them develop their character, develop their mind, independent of being told by some medium what they must be. And when I see the damage on our campuses that these apps are doing, a lot of the mental illness that we are seeing is directly related to that, because students are being told who they must be, right? They're not saying explore it, explore who you are. They're saying, okay, if you don't look this way, if you don't play these games, if you're not on this chat, then you don't matter. And I see this in my own family with my granddaughter and the impact that it's having on her. I know I'm a fuddy-duddy, okay? I know that. But when my granddaughter comes to me, beautiful child, I can show her a picture, beautiful child, and what's the most important thing to her? She wants to have an earring in her eyebrow. Please, okay, I mean, honestly, it reminds me of when my son was in college. You know, kids go to college and they come back with terrible ideas. But anyway, so he goes off to college, and again, I'm a fuddy-duddy. Okay, so he comes back home. The first time he comes back home, dreadlocks. And, you know, I'm trying to understand this because I'm like, I resort to type, like all those parents who say, well, how are you going to get a job looking like that, right? right? So I've grown since then. I really have. But we all have the proclivity to live in our era and to privilege our age as being the most important. And so I'm very much aware of that, and so I try not to think of these media that we have available as being as dangerous as perhaps they could be. But I must say AI is going to give us a run for the money because already we are in a space we don't understand, and we're looking to a future that we cannot anticipate with AI. And so how we're going to manage that, nobody knows. Nobody has any idea how that's actually going to be managed. And so you now have AI experts who are convening groups to think this through, but I just don't see what is going to help us be whole human beings from that, okay? And that, to me, being a whole human being is being in a dialogue with you, okay? Reaching out and touching someone, learning about somebody from a different background, learning about what that means for me and the world that I come from. All of that learning from interaction with people is somehow cannot be supplanted, I believe, with TikTok or with other apps. I just don't get it.
All right, we're gonna end on that.
There's one more there.
We're at time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ruth, so good to see you. I'm a two-level here at UT. I'm a graduate of Grade A. You were my president all 4 years of me being at UT. So I just want to say thank you publicly to everybody because a huge part of why I'm in law school today was just seeing how you led our campus and changed so much during my 4 years there. But my question to you is, what would you say is one of the most systematic and historical challenges facing our HBCUs today?
Well, I would say it's no different. It's been for the history of HBCUs funding. It continues to be, and I think one of the things that I'm hopeful, I'm working with Harvard on an HBCU initiative, because my goal is to get universities in this country to acknowledge a profound injustice that has been done. And that is all the funding that they have been able to accrue over time, okay, that has grown immeasurably, is matched by the impoverishment of HBCUs who have not enjoyed any of that. And so to me, the obligation of higher education is to jump in and to interact with HBCUs and share the resources that they have. And so at Harvard, what we're doing is creating programs that for research HBCUs that will bring scholars and students to Harvard and to send Harvard students and scholars to HBCUs. Policymakers at UT, are you listening? Okay, so thank you, thank you.